Right, today's make is we're going to make this pouch to keep your rotary cutter and your scissors in. At least this is what I like to keep in mine. And this is basically made using 2 layer cake squares. So if you've got a pile of Moda layer cakes or any other brand, these are Moda layer cakes, which are 10-inch squares, and you don't know what to do with them, this is a good accessory to make. So you'll want 2 layer cake squares, which are 10-inch squares. You'll want a coordinating thread. You'll want about 1 metre of double fold bias binding. You can make your own. If you make your own, make it so it's the finished size is 1/2 inch wide. Doesn't need to be cut on the bias because we're not going around any curves. And then you need some Bosal double-sided fusible foam stabiliser. This was provided to me by the lovely people at Bosal. It's a foam interfacing, which makes it things quite soft and sturdy, and it's got a layer of adhesive fabric on either side. Right, the tools that you're going to need are you're going to need some poppers or snaps, cam snaps. I've put 2 on here. You could use sewing Velcro or hook and loop tape instead if you want. But if you've got the snaps, this is my selection. So you're going to need 2 to 3 of those, depending on how many you want to use. You'll need the tool for applying them, a rotary cutter and a ruler, or pen and scissors and a ruler to cut out your foam or your bias binding if you're making your own. I use a pair of snips all the time. Some quilting tape, 1/4 inch quilting tape is handy but not essential, and I'm using an air erasable pen for marking where my snaps need to go or any other markings I need to make. What's also handy to have is this is called a purple thang type of tool for helping things go under your foot on your machine. You could also use a walking foot as well. You might find that makes things easier as well. So once you've gathered all your supplies together, join me back here to start making your pouch. Okay, the first thing we want to do is just make our bias tape. So I'm using shop bought. My tape comes like this. This is single fold bias tape. Double fold looks like this, where it's folded in half. If you've got single fold bias tape, first thing you need to do is make it into double fold. So we're going to fold it over in half, but just short. Don't fold it so the edges meet perfectly. You want to fold it so one is slightly shorter than the other. It's a bit hard to see on this yellow, so you can see here on the blue where I folded it so this side is shorter than this side, so that when we sew this onto the pouch later, your bigger side is sure to catch the stitches on the other side. So make sure you do that. If you are making your own bias binding from scratch, you need to cut yourself strips 2-inch wide. Okay, so you'll have your 2 10-inch squares, and then you need to cut your Bosal foam 9.5-inch squared, just so it's a little bit less than these squares, so you've got it's not in your 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. So you're going to cut that to 9.5-inch square. Is lay 1 square down, right side down, wrong side up, because there's glue on both sides here, and then centre your foam in the middle of that square best you can, and then place the other square over the top. Now it won't stick both sides down at the same time, but this makes sure you get everything centered. And then get your dry iron, cotton setting, and then just hold it for about 10 or 12 seconds. And we're pressing, we're not ironing it round, we're pressing. So once you've done one space, lift it and move it across, do the next space until everything is fused. So once that's fused, if you put at the edges, you can see that that's properly fused. Then we're going to turn it over, reline this back up, and then repeat on this side. Now once all that is fused, please let it cool down properly first. Once your glue's set, it's less likely to wrinkle or peel off once the glue's properly set, because whilst it's warm, the glue is obviously still a bit sticky and things can move. So I suggest you go off, make yourself a cup of tea, cup of coffee, and let that cool down properly before we come back and start to sew it. Okay, so now we want to decide which way up we're going to fold this, which piece of fabric you want to see here on the front, and then the top's going to fold down. So I quite like how this looks here, so I'm just going to open that up so this is at the top. Okay, so we're just going to attach the binding to this section. I've just cut a piece long enough to fit, and then you're going to take the narrower side and then fasten that along the top edge, pin it or clip it or just hold it, whatever you feel most comfortable doing. So now we're going to sew in the crease or slightly to the inside of the crease. So if I put my foot down so the crease lines up with the centre, and I'm just going to knock my needle, turn my needle so it moves across a couple of marks to the right, and then just sew down, keeping my crease lined up with the centre of my foot. Okay, so that's stitched there. So we'll just give that a good press all the way along. Okay, so I've just pressed that seam. So we're just going to turn it over to the other side now, and fold this seam back so it covers the previous line of stitching. I'm just going to clip that in place. Put your clips upside down because you're going to turn this over and stitch from the other side. Okay. Right, turn back to the other side. And this time we're going to stitch in the ditch. So in that crease line that you've already made, we're just going to stitch in that line. I'm just going to increase my stitch length to 3mm. Okay, so that's pretty much stitched in the ditch. If you struggle staying within the ditch, then you can just stitch onto the binding about just a little bit in. And there we go, that's that stitched onto the binding. Not perfect, but it's going to be on the inside and you won't see it anyway. And then we're going to fold this front up. So we need to fold it up about 4 inches. So it'll be 4 inches here and then matching there. So I just line it up on my board, 2, 3, 4. That's about, match it on that side. And then a couple of clips. And then go back to the machine and just base stitch these 2 sides down about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge. You can use a long stitch, it's just to hold them in place while we bind the rest of it. Okay, that's the sides base stitched. So now we're going to put the rest of the binding on all the way around. So we're going to start at one end, find which is your shortest edge because that's the one you're going to attach to the front. So this is the shortest one, so this is going to attach on here. So overhang the edge because this, when you get to the other side, you're going to fold in. So about 1 inch. And then just put a few clips in this. Okay, so we're just going to, you can either do like you did before, whichever way you did it. You can either stitch directly on the line, I'm going to try that this time, directly in the crease. I'm just going to reduce my stitch back down to my normal size. Don't forget to back stitch here. And then just follow that crease all the way down. For 1/4 of an inch in is about there. So stitch till you're about 1/4 of an inch up from the bottom. And then just rotate, leave your needle in, rotate, and then stitch off the corner. Cut your thread. Turn, and then going to fold your binding forward onto the angle, so it's like at a 45-degree angle across the centre, and then fold it back again, holding that in place. Till this is flush across the edge and the fold is even with the edge of the binding that you've just sewn there. The same distance here where your stitch line is, and the same distance up. Okay, put your needle back down there, that's where you're going to start sewing. Back stitch a couple of times, and then you're going to follow this crease all the way down again. So again we're going to stop about, it was about 1/2 inch, I think I said 1/4 inch before, about 1/2 inch from the bottom. So I'll stop at that mark, and then turn, and there's the corner, stitch off the corner. Thread. Then again, like before, fold it back from the point at a 45-degree angle, that's the angle that you've sewn at, and then hold in there, fold it back forward, this is the fiddliest bit, till this line is flush with the edge of the pouch. and this fold is flush with the this edge of the pouch. You can clip that if you need to, and you can put a mark where you're going to start stitching if it helps. So follow that line down to there on that line, and that's where you're going to start stitching. And then we're going to stitch right down to the edge and back stitch. Put your thread. And that section we've now done. Okay, so now we're going to fold this all to the other side. Tuck in those corners under. It should have like a mitered corner there. Fold to the back. And then again you're going to fold down, covering that stitch line, just covering that stitch line, and clip all that into place. Push right up to the corner and then fold in. Then put your clips upside down because we're going to turn this over. Now before we get right to the end, I'm just going to leave about an inch. And over. Clip that into place. So you can see there, this one is just long, a bit longer than that one. Depending on how accurate you get this, depends on how well you stay on stitching from the front and it actually stitching on the back. So you need to make sure that it's complete, that the line's covered all the way around. Again, when you get to this section, push it right over on the corner and then fold it back. If you find it's not covering the line, you may just need to go around and trim a bit of your seam allowance off before you fold your binding over. Right, again at this end, just trim that off. I just want to fold this end in. You'll find this easier than I am because I'm working around a camera. Poke that under. Okay. Just check your corners look okay from the front. They don't look too bad. And then once you've done that, we're then going to start like we did before. I'll just take that clip off and stitch in the ditch. I'm just going to extend my stitch length to 3. You don't have to do this, but if you see it, I think it looks a bit nicer. You could stitch slightly on to this line. That would 100% should make sure that you get it, catch it completely on the back. But if you're comfortable stitching in the ditch, then you won't see it, or hardly see it, on the front if you're using a coordinating thread. Don't forget to back stitch. And just take your time. Leave your needle down, lift your foot and turn. There, we've just caught it all the way along the back. Back stitch at the end. Turn it over. Pretty much caught it. Oh, just missed a bit there. Can go back and re-go over that. It's almost right there. Just caught there. And missed there. So, if we weren't happy with that, if you were concerned about doing that, I'll do it again just to show. If you line up with the crease, if you're worried about not catching on the back, move your needle across. I've gone across about 3 dots there, and then stitch it directly onto the bias. Follow the crease of your back, the join with your bias in here, down the centre of your foot. There we go, so this time you can see it. This does take a bit of practice to get right. And fold it down, and then you'll see a line actually directly on your bias binding. There we go. So I have a double line because I've done it the first time. But if you pick which way you want to do it, how accurate you think you'll be, you can always, when you fold your bias binding around the back as well, use a tiny bit of glue on the back of that to make sure it stays in place as well. Okay, so we're just going to mark now where we want our snaps. I've got my snaps and my tool for attaching, so you just need to decide where you want to put them. So I'm going to do the outside ones first. I think I'm going to place them. So I'm going to place mine 1/2 inch up, 2 inches in from the edge, and mark 1, 2. Okay. Okay, so you just need a pokey tool or a long needle just to poke a hole through where a snap's going to go. So I'll do both of them at once. That one there. That one there. And choose your snaps. I think I'll pick these ones. So you need your backs. They got this one on the outside of the flap. And then you get a male and a female part. So we need 2 of each of those. And I put on the flap, I put the male part. So you just pop that over the top and you get your tool. And this flat section here goes over the cap, and the clear, squishier section goes over the male part. So we just need to get them in between the tool. Make sure it's properly lined up. And then give that a good squeeze, and then that flattens the sharp point that's inside to hold it in place. So I'll just do the second one. So there's the second one. And then close up to see where where these are going to fasten to. Bear in mind what you're going to put inside as well. So if you need a bit of room, you can slide it up just a little bit. You don't have to have it completely flush down. You could slide the flap up a little bit if you needed to give it a bit of room when you put something in. I'm just going to, where that meets the fabric, I'm just going to mark that and then measure how far in that is. So that's 2 inches in, which we should know anyway, and that is a full inch down from the top. So if I line up 2 inches from the side and then 1 inch down, put the dot there, that should be the right place for that one as well. So poke a hole through for there. Now this time the cap is going to go on the inside. And then the female section is going to go on the outside. So again, make sure that this flat section goes over the cap so you don't crush it, and the clear section goes over the female section. Now just remember to make sure you line it up properly, because otherwise you can crush the sides of the snap. Because there's a little metal bar inside, and if you get that over the edge, it can squash the edge of your snap, so make sure you get it in place. There we go. So last one. Okay. So they should then close. So there we go. There's our rotary cutter cum scissors pouch. So that should now fit our rotary cutter in, and possibly even our scissors too, if we put them in the right way around. Scissors first. Rotary cutter, making sure your blade's tucked away. No, we'll go that way. I can actually get both of those in there, so if you're going to a craft club, you're taking them with you, they're nicely protected. So all you need for that, for your charm squares, the binding on this one I made by cutting strips from another charm square, just stitching them together so that you had a coordinated binding. Again, when you're making that binding, you just, when you fold them in half, make sure one side's a little bit shorter than the other. So I hope you enjoyed that class.